let's say, main benefits of the monitoring mechanism. The monitoring aims, of course, to give member states and European countries more in general information on the level of implementation of the European Interoperability Framework. It also gives insights on the areas of improvement when it comes to the implementation of the recommendation of the EIF. And finally, it helps identify synergy across European countries, which can, of course, facilitate interoperability and the establishment of interoperable services. So let's have a look a bit more in detail about on how the monitoring is structured. So basically, the data collection, so the two, let's say, indicators that I mentioned before, the primary indicators and secondary indicators, give information on the state of implementation of the 37 recommendations. And these 37 recommendations under the monitoring framework are clustered under 3 scoreboards, which are based on the 3 pillars of the EIF, which are the interoperability principles, the interoperability layers, and the EIF conceptual model. The interoperability framework, interoperability principles scoreboards basically describe the context in which European public services are designed and implemented. The second scoreboards give insight on the state of play of the 4 layers of interoperability, which are legal, organizational, semantic, and technical interoperability. And finally, the EIF conceptual frameworks, the conceptual model, basically, this scoreboard aims to guide the planning, development, and operation and maintenance of public services within member states and European countries. So let's say it's a more practical scoreboard. So while the first 2 are more theoretical, this measures more concrete elements of the implementation of the EIF. And in the 2022 edition, an additional scoreboard was added to these 3 scoreboards. So we have a 4th scoreboard, which is on cross-border interoperability. We have, sorry, Allegra, thank you. So basically, this scoreboard is a transversal scoreboard. As you can see, the recommendations and therefore the thematic areas are the same that are mentioned in the first 3 scoreboards. And here in the slide, we have highlighted those thematic areas that are under the first scoreboard of interoperability, of cross-border interoperability. But let's say we under this scoreboard, all these thematic areas are tackled from a explicitly cross-border dimension. So basically, this is a let's say transversal an additional scoreboard, but it has elements in common with the first 3 scoreboards. So let's have a look at the results of 2022 data collection. So basically, this is a very high-level analysis of the results. The graphs show the results at European level. So this is the average that can go from 0 to 4, as you know, the score. And basically, each graph shows the score for 2021, which is the line highlighted in blue for scoreboard 1, and the area highlighted in blue shows the score for 2022. So for what concerns scoreboard 1, which is on the interoperability principles, we can observe, which is very good, improvement in the first principle of subsidiarity and proportionality. So the score went up from 3 to 4. And areas of improvement are still present. So under particular under principle 7 on inclusion and accessibility, under principle 9 on multilingualism, and under principle 12 on assessment and of effectiveness and efficiency. But these are all already score of 3. So let's say overall the results show a good implementation on average by European countries. for what concerns the first scoreboards, and in particular the interoperability principles. And sorry, maybe I forgot to mention at the beginning of the analysis, but this is the average for all the European countries that were taken into account in this year data collection, so for 31 countries from Europe. And for what concerns scoreboard 2, we do not see an improvement as for scoreboard 1 in 2022 compared to 2021, but still already, as you can see, the scores were already very high in 2021. So almost all thematic areas had reached the maximum score of 4 already in 2021. But room for improvement is still there's still room for improvement under the interoperability governance. And of course, this score already is 3, so he's high, but this is where most member states, where most countries, European countries, still have scores that are under 3. So the average, of course, is 3, but there is still room for improvement in a lot of countries under this thematic area. And thank you. So for scoreboard 3, which is the conceptual model, the results are, let's say, slightly lower compared to the first 2 scoreboards. But as I mentioned before, this is a more concrete scoreboard, so we have recommendations that are more practical. And in this sense, the application of this recommendation and implementation of these recommendations require, let's say, additional efforts from European countries. So in a way, it's harder to achieve higher results in this scoreboard compared to the first 2. Here, overall, the results are good, once again, but there's still a lot of room for improvement when it comes to in particular, concerning the setting up of catalogs for European public services, for the room for improvement in the use of external information sources and services while developing public services, and also room for improvements when it comes to the assurance that security and privacy matters are, let's say, extensively taken into account when providing public services. Overall, the results are good once again, but we in this scoreboard we observe, let's say, higher room for improvement and more areas, broader areas for improvement across European countries. And finally, the last scoreboard, which is scoreboard 4. This is the cross-border scoreboard, which was new in the 2022 data collection. So as you can see here, we do not have a comparison between the 2021 results and 2022 results, but instead the line in green in the graph is lighting and is basically showing the results for the very same thematic areas, but under the other scoreboards. So basically, here we have a comparison between the score under each thematic area from a cross-border dimension and from a, let's say, non-cross-border dimension. And of course, the cross-border dimension is embodied, let's say, in the EIF itself, so it's embedded in each other scoreboard and in each recommendation. But here, the scoreboard explicitly tackled, let's say, and highlight the results of the countries, and here on average at European level when it comes to cross-border interoperability. So overall, the scores are good, especially when it comes to the interoperability layers. On the other hand, there's still room for improvements when it comes to interoperability principles. So it's very interesting because we see, as you can see under principle 10, there is, let's say, a gap between the cross-border dimension and the non-cross-border dimension. So in scoreboard 1, the scoreboard was 4 for administrative simplification, while when we examining the explicitly cross-border dimension, the score is 3. So let's say there's still room for improvement under this topic, under this area. And since we do not have, let's say, historical data for cross-border dimension, what we're going to do next is to give a, let's say, deeper analysis of this scoreboard, so on cross-border interoperability. And I will now leave the floor to Federico to give you more insights on cross-border interoperability.
I was muted, sorry. Thanks a lot, Emilia, and good morning to everyone. Indeed, I mean, the scope or the focus of this session is the cross-border part, so we thought it would have been important also to share some more insights on the score per recommendation, so to have a deeper look on what are the areas of improvement, but more specifically also the challenges that the member states are facing when it comes to cross-border. So we'll be focusing only on the recommendation where we have the highest room for improvement, but in case of any question, feel free to take the lead and unmute yourself or to write into the chat. We'll start with the cross-border aspect. Yes, Michael.
Hello and good morning. I've got one question and several comments of this methodology. So we recently have an opportunity to discuss, to have a friendly conversation with the Wavestone. But on this, let me start with the general question: do European results for the EIF are rounded mean or dominant or something else? Because we see in the previous presentation of the EIF, there were round numbers. So do they mean rounded mean or they dominant or something else?
It's the median. It's a third option. It's the median, and the median has been chosen together with GRC for the simple reason that at the beginning, when creating the conceptual model, we tried to reduce the burden on the member states as much as possible. That meant that sometimes a KPI might be addressing different aspects of different recommendations. The reason being is that some of them slightly overlap. So instead of asking twice the same question or slightly different, we use the same KPI, and to ensure, let's say, robustness on the scoring mechanism, the median was the most appropriate way forward.
Okay, so thank you for your explanation. So maybe because I have an opportunity to talk, I will briefly comment on some, I would say, flaws from our point of view of methodology. We value very much the monitoring of the EIF and BDM, so we wholeheartedly support it. But during this recently monitoring exercise, we spotted some flaws from our point of view. We communicated it to the Wavestone and had a friendly conversation on it. So I will briefly mention it, not to take too much time, and then I will provide the details afterwards. So first, we see that within this methodology, the author of the methodology decided to pick up the concrete examples of the organizations, standardization of organizations with whom it's needed to cooperate. So, for example, within the interoperability governance, the Polish score was lowered from the score of 3 in 2021 to score to 2 of 2022 in relation to 2022 because Poland didn't cooperate in the last year with the W3C. We saw the Wavestone spreadsheet, which enumerates organizations with whom there should be cooperation, but we provided a list of other standardization institutions because methodology requires satisfying collaboration with the predefined institutions. Our score was lowered. So after intervention and taking into account other organizations mentioned in the comment, the Polish comment, the score fortunately was updated to a higher level. So my point is to be more flexible when it takes into account the cooperation with different standardization institutions because it affects the score for interoperability governance. The other thing is that I've got some general remark on the methodology. So in the case of insufficient or no data given, methodology presents 0 as a numerical answer. 0 is mathematically lower than 1, so the presentation of member state of play could be misleading to the monitoring recipients. And the other thing which is very important is if we provide as a member state a lot of information, a lot of data, but do not satisfy the methodology, there is also information of no data. I've got an example when in relation to the cross-border reusability, we provided the answers to 7 out of 8 questions related to the 7 out of 8 KPIs, but because of the methodology, the information summing up the usability in cross-border environment was no data. So even if we provided majority of information, majority of data, the methodology is used to present that we, as a member state, provided no data. So I will not elaborate on it right now because I don't want to take too much time, but I will gladly provide detailed comments later on. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Michael. I will briefly reply to your points. And first of all, thanks a lot for pointing them out. And then, of course, if you want to have a separate call, happy to have it. In relation to the additional part, indeed, we have the validation process in place explicitly for this reason. So to be sure that the interpretation of comments is the right one, and indeed there was I think a discussion you had with Emilia, and after that we happily took that into consideration. Usually we tend to have that kind of step done a bit earlier during the validation process. So the kind of exchange usually happens a bit earlier to avoid arriving to the moment of the publication of results and seeing some mismatch. But indeed, the flexibility is a key point, also because the EIF is a self-assessment and is meant to provide you the insight that you need, so as to reflect the reality. So indeed, is a quite important point. On the second one, on the let's say threshold for having as a results not available data or not, that is a statistical rule. Usually it's point at 1/3, so 66.7%, and there are two reasons why it's in place. The first one is to avoid that the answer, the score for the answer which you provide reply to bias the ones on which you didn't. And the second one is it's not, of course, the case of your country or the EIF in general, but it's a statistical rule when there is an assessment. Sometimes where a subject tends to have a lower score, tends to reply not applicable or don't know, to avoid having a lower score. So to avoid that, there is that kind of situation. This is a very good practice and a rule of thumb to use this threshold to ensure that no data is biased. But in any case, it's more statistical, more on the conceptual part. Happy to take that offline afterwards or during the break if you prefer.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. So going back to the results at recommendation level, we'll be focusing when it comes to the principle on recommendation 9, 14, and 16. Recommendation 9 is related to the principle of technological neutrality and data portability. This means ensuring that data can be easily transferable between applications and systems and across border. Here we'll just point out what are, let's say, the hindering point or the most common feedback that we receive from the member states. And in this case, the elements that are hindering a score of 4 are related to the legacy systems, and especially to the developing of APIs. So this is something that is still ongoing and is causing not, let's say, full score there. A second point is related to the ongoing initiative, meaning that many member states didn't apply the option that will provide the maximum score because the initiative are still ongoing and are not finalized. And more generally, and lastly, let's say when it comes to data portability, common challenges are related to the semantic, organizational, and legal aspect, and the lack of common building block for data exchanges. Moving on, recommendation 14 is related to inclusion and accessibility. So when it comes to European public services, to be sure that are accessible to all citizens, including persons with disability, elderly, and disadvantaged group. Here we were focusing more on the compliance with the directive on the accessibility of website and mobile application. And while we noticed that all the websites that were published after 2018 are almost fully compliant, the one published before are still have still some room of improvement to be fully compliant, and the same goes with the mobile applications. Moving on to recommendation 16 and to principle 9, the one related to multilingualism. Here we were assessing, let's say, the level of multilingualism of European digital public services, and more specifically, the availability in different languages of the procedure related to the single digital gateway. And the main challenges were related to the fact that on top of the national language, of course, those procedures were available mainly in English and non other languages, because some of the procedures are managed at local level. So this means this poses, let's say, a constraint when it comes to resources and the possibility to, let's say, have those procedures available in multiple languages. Another point was related also to the fact that some countries have many local languages on top of the national one, and this means that those services are provided also in those languages. Then moving on administrative simplification, so recommendation 17, the data here are mainly secondary data, so they are related mainly to the government benchmark, and we were assessing the administrative simplification related to EID, e-documents, or in general percentage of public services available online for cross-border users. On the second graph is the one related to the layers of interoperability, and we'll be focusing on interoperability governance. I don't know if you have in mind the graph we were showing before, but it's, let's say, the layer that still has a bit of room of improvement. And we'll be focusing on recommendation 22, 23, and 24. So on recommendation 23, we were assessing the use of a structured and transparent, objective and common approach to assess standard and specification. Here, let's say the highest challenge is related to the identification of a candidate standard and specification existing at European level based on specific needs and requirements, and also the lack of a commonly deployed assessment method for standard and specification, as might be CAMS or any assessment framework. For recommendation 23, here we were focusing on the use of ICT catalogs. And just to give you an idea on the use of the different catalogs, when it comes to, or more than the use, the consultation of different catalogs of ICT standard and specification, when it comes to the use of catalog of other countries, and it's quite important if we're talking about cross-border services, only 23% of the countries were consulting them. However, when it comes to, let's say, European ones, the percentage increases by a lot, meaning that if we're talking about the EU catalog of ICT standards, we're more or less around 76%. Join up reaches 71% as, let's say, the best performer. And then there is, of course, the creation and use of national catalog or other options. Then the last recommendation is recommendation 24, and it's the one Michael was pointing out on the active participation within the past year in initiatives, international initiative for standardization. And here, almost all countries participated at least in one initiative, but not many of them participated in a variety of different initiatives. Then moving on the third part, so the conceptual model. If Allegra, you could move on. Thanks a lot. We are talking here about the conceptual model for European public services, and for lack of time, we'll be focusing on the base registry, so recommendation 37 and 38. When it comes to recommendation 37, here we are talking about the availability of authoritative sources, so base registries, to other countries across border. And just to give you, let's say, some statistics, while the base registries of business and vehicles are broadly available across border, relatively 60% and 56%, the percentage lowers when it comes to tax, only 46, population 43, and land 33. On recommendation 34, that is not based on the availability of those base registries, but the existence of agreements on reference data in form of taxonomies, control vocabularies, thesaurus, and so on. The percentage across all the base registries significantly lowers to around 20–25%. I see some comments in the chat. Apologies, I missed that. Yes, indeed, we'll be sharing the slides in right after. I don't know if there are any questions related to the scores at recommendation level. Otherwise, we can move on the next part that I believe is the most interesting one and the most interactive one. So we'll be moving on to the good practice sharing. And Allegra, if you could go on with the slides. Thanks a lot. And we'll have two lightning talk from Matthias and Anna Rosa. And this is meant to be the most interactive part. So if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to raise your hand. We'll be addressing them right at the end, or to write them in the chat, and they will be asked right after the presentation. We'll have a two lightning talk of 15 minutes and then a panel discussion of an additional 15 minutes. So without any further ado, I will leave the floor to Matthias.
Thanks a lot, Federico, and thanks for inviting me here. I will talk a bit on, if you could switch to the next slide, from DIG, as mentioned, Agency for Digital Government, and I work as an information architect at DIG. If we see the next slide on, and also the next, on our vision, this is DIG's vision: sustainable welfare society that meet people's future's needs. The way we at DIG try to achieve this vision is through the digitalization of the public administration in Sweden, regions, municipalities, and authorities, so that they can offer simpler, more open, and more efficient services to everyone. And this summarizes why we digitalize and how we at DIG work to ensure that digitalization takes place. We mean that digitalization, or the digital transformation, has no intrinsic value. It's an enabler for us. It's above all about simplifying people's everyday lives and extracting as much value from the public administration as possible. And digitalization must contribute to our vision: sustainable welfare society that meets people's future needs. If we take a look at the scoreboard 4 on the next slide. So here you see the results of Sweden on scoreboard 4 on the cross-border interoperability aspect. Shows an upper medium performance of the country, but particularly Sweden received the highest score of 4 for 6 EIF principles: legal, semantic, and technical interoperability, as well as for the open data component of the conceptual model. However, we heard both Emilia and Federico mentioning room for improvement, and I also stressed that the biggest room in the world, there is always room for improvement. Sweden has still margin for improvement in relation to Principle 7, inclusion and accessibility cross-border, and Principle 9, multilingualism cross-border, and Principle 10, administrative simplification, as well as in relation to the area of security and privacy cross-border. We also had we have to work with simplifying processes and use digital channels whenever appropriate for delivery of European public services. We can take the next slide. I would like to exemplify with a glance on some collaborative platforms that we have or are using here in Sweden. There are two GitHub sites where there are several repositories for reusable open source solutions, specifications, pre-studies, and so on. For example, on Dig Sweden on GitHub, we have the Swedish application profile for DCAT APSE 2.0, some solutions for the COVID certificate service and verification for the certificates. And those were used by several other member states during the pandemic period. So that's an example of cross-border use where interoperability solutions are available for everyone. On Sweden Connect, there is the technical specification for the Swedish EID framework, for example. I also here like to mention the Swedish data portal, Sveriges Dataportal, which is harvested to the EDP. And we have collaboration possibilities around data and the API, concepts and specifications. And we also here have I would say, a vivid and vibrant online community. Also an initiative called Public AI. There is cross-border possibilities to take part of the concepts and specifications and also contribute here. Also a short mention of the NOSAD. It's mainly a Swedish community with presentations and newsletter, but there is also a vivid community on mainly open source code. You can take the next slide and mention something about the EID and trust services. For example, we have the Nordic Baltic cooperation program, the cross-border digital service program, CBS. That's a strategic initiative from the Nordic Council of Ministers, and it aims to accelerate digital transformation of the Nordic Baltic region. And I can also mention something about the plan for a national ID. In June 2022, the government assigned the task of analyzing possibilities and submitting proposals for the production and operation of an EID with a level of assurance high provided by a governmental authority. Main objective is to include those who today cannot get an EID. Big estimated that the development of an EID issued by the government will take at least 24 months. In December 2022, the government announced the appointment of a committee of inquiry to further examine and suggest how an EID with level of assurance high can be designed and provided by a government authority. The committee has until 2024 to inquire this. And the users shall be in full control of the use of the European digital identity wallet and the data contained therein. And last on this picture, the Swedish government has implemented this EIDAS infrastructure and has established communication with all notified countries, which are also technically prepared to deliver the assertions according to their notification. 190 agencies and municipalities have now integrated cross-border authentication among their EIF services or have initiated the integration process. But most of the services require that the ID assertion contains a Swedish identification number, which prevents users to take full advantage of the service. Yes, this picture, cross-border infrastructures. Sweden participates in several major activities providing vehicle information at the European level, including the European Car and Driving License Information System, EUCARIS. Sweden is also a member of the European Land Information Service and ULIS, and part of the e-Justice portal and the Business Registry Interconnection System, BRIS. And PEPL, where DIG manages the Swedish jurisdiction as a national PEPL authority. And also the large-scale pilots. Sweden was among 50 organizations from 20 EU member states and associated countries that participated in the two projects. And this is now the basis for the technical system that handles the exchange of information regulated by the SD regulation. And the technical system for, let me take something about the EESSI. We make use of the electronic exchange of social security information, and that system helps social security bodies across the EU to exchange information more rapidly and safely. I can mention something about the Nordic Smart Government and Business, NSGMB. It was initiated by the Director-Generals of the Nordic Business Registers in 2016, and it has support from the Nordic Innovation, which is the Nordic Council of Ministers. And since 2021, all Nordic tax authorities are involved and have a seat in the steering group. And in 2022, an extensive work took place to pilot and test the solutions and cooperate with stakeholders in the market. Last, the Swedish e-health agency, E-hälsomyndigheten, is the national contact point for e-health, NCP-EH at EU level. At present, the Swedish e-health agency is finalizing the infrastructure that is needed to send e-prescriptions cross-border. That was Sweden at a glance. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the insight and all the information shared. So now the floor is open for questions. So feel free to either unmute yourself and address any question or to write in the chat. And maybe just to break the ice, I would start with one question, because I noticed that open source plays a big role in the cross-border effort of Sweden. So my question is related to the benefit that you might have noticed in the use of open source, especially because with platforms as GitHub and so on, the contribution can really come across all Europe, and there are many member states and countries in Europe in general that are building the catalog of open source solution and at the same time being active user of GitHub or other platforms. So do you think that the use of open source is an enabler for cross-border efforts?
Yes, definitely. I think it's a big enabler, and we would much appreciate to have an assignment on open source. We don't have, but we have a policy on open source, which DIG has a policy on open source that all our products should be developed with open source. And we have seen that several other public agencies has taken after, but to get some drive and resources, we would need to have some special assignment connected to the use of open source. Because, as you say, it's definitely an enabler for cross-border interoperability and interoperability within Sweden also.
Thanks a lot. Maybe just to complement, because there is also the Open Source Observatory of the Commission as well, and there is also a dedicated space for collecting information across Europe on both, let's say, the state of play of open source and also resources that can be competence centers or repositories of open source solutions. So that might be a good, let's say, starting point to collect information or have a better view at European level. I will share in a second the link in the chat. Any additional questions? If not, then yes. Yes, Robin.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Robin Smith. I'm a consultant working at the Joint Research Centre. Matthias, to take the opportunity to ask a little bit more about the Baltic collaboration or the Nordic countries collaboration. Are you ever talking about investing together to make common solutions, particularly procurement? I know a little bit in the past in the context of Inspire that people paid for open source software development, little pieces for sharing metadata. They organized themselves to individually make contributions. But I'm curious if this has become, this is from 10 years ago, but if this has become more regular. Have you ever discussed about how you could procure together or develop together solutions also for cross-border interoperability? Thanks.
Thanks for the question. I should say that I'm not familiar with if there are any such discussions, not that I'm aware of. I can mention that the Nordic Smart Government and Business, that collaboration, they got money from the Nordic Innovation. So maybe my best guess would be that they are discussing it in the Nordic Smart Government and Business Cooperation, but I'm not sure. Sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional question or comment to be shared? Okay, if not, then we'll be moving on with Ana Rosa. And good morning. The floor is all yours.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen.
Yes.
Can you see it?
Yes. Now we can.
The main. I mean, the presentation mode. You can see the presentation mode. No?
Yes.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. The first of all is that trying to explain our current scenario, because as you all know, Spain welcomes casual and resident foreigners. There are some figures in Spanish that I translated. We are about more than 47 million population, but in 2022 we received more than 71 million of people, just tourists. You can see here the figures. We receive more than about 1 million from Germany, from 1 million from France, 1,300,000 from UK. So we have a big need of this cross-border situation, and also the permanent residents here in Spain. We have more than 5.5 million in 2022. Over 1,600,000 from the European Union, but also more than 1 million from Africa and more than 1 million from South America. So our need for cross-border is not only for European Union, but for, as you can see, from any part of the world. For us, cross-border interoperability is grounded in our 3 pillars for interoperability. It's an interaction between a legal framework, a framework for cooperation and governance, and also a framework for common services. In the intersection of these 3 pillars, there are our digital administration from 2015. Legally speaking, public administration is equivalent to digital public administration. So, as our colleague said before, we have many sectoral cross-border systems that we are participating in, like the EESCI from Social Security, UCARIS for vehicles information, tax sciences instead and the DXC, MREX for the students, criminal records, ECRIS, business registries, with BRIS, etc., etc., etc. Also, we are now building transversal cross-border systems. Spain is an active participant in EPSI, in the European Blockchain Service Infrastructure, the European Digital Identity Wallet, and also the One Solid Technical System. Talking about building blocks, we have a main building block for e-signature, which is already integrated with European TLS under the EIDAS regulation. So from 2009, 2007, we have a legal framework for digital signatures, for electronic signatures. We are quite our regulation is grounded on these digital signatures because our national identity is a digital one. It's a smart card, so we can sign things digitally with our national identity card. And also our professional cards are smart cards, so we can also sing as professionals in a digital form. So every public administration in Spain can use, it's a arroba firma. This is a building block, and they don't mind. They don't need to mind about the EIDAS regulation or which are the TLS to use. On the other side, for public services for businesses, our 2015 legal framework establishes that they can only relate with public administration by electronic means. So it is true that from the service directive, most of this electronic relationship is based on affidavits. So either in PDF forms or web forms, all the interaction between public administration and any company, whatever is the origin of this company, is made through these affidavits. So they are these forms are customized, are adapted to businesses coming from anywhere in the world. Regarding the study field, the study related public services uses auto registration. So any student from anywhere in the world can register themselves, giving a name, a given name, family name, the birthday, the type of identity document. I mean, it could be a passport. And then they have a username and password to enter to, in this case, is the electronic, the electronic procedure portal for the Ministry of Education and Professional Training. And for instance, we also have a general service provides with what we call UNED Assist. UNED Assist is a single point of access of any foreign student that can want to access to a Spanish university. So through this single point of access, they provide all the required documentation, diplomas, or whatever, and this service make the proper arrangements for the university. So the enrollment in the Spanish university are easy because of this single point of access. And finally, for taxpayers, they need a tax identifier, even if they don't have a national identifier or a national foreign identifier. So our tax agency provides these identifiers for any individual or legal person and organization that wants to make business in Spain, either virtually or presentially, because at the end they need to pay taxes in Spain. So in that regard, they provide online this what we call the national fiscal identifier. However, we have faced some legal barriers for this cross-border interoperability. The first one is the identity or matching, or the record matching. We have been one of the first countries notifying an ID, an electronic identifier for the EIDAS nodes, precisely because we have this smart card for the national identity. However, the matching is not easy. We have nationals with this national identifier, and also with the fiscal identifier, and foreigners with what we call NIE for residents, or the fiscal identifier M for others which are not has not the residency in Spain. So we are working on this European census. What we call the European census is being built by, well, is built because it's finished. It's built by the Spanish tax agency from the taxpayer census. They have a database with taxpayers in Spain. They are a unique identifier, depending on if they are national, foreign, or none of them. However, we need some legal adjustments to put this in production. We have now in production the easy part. I mean, if the matching is easy, then there is no problem. It is working. Or if the matching has been previously done in face-to-face in an office, it can work as well. However, the tax agency needs to be a data processor for data, which is something that is under the GDPR. We need to adapt our situation to match this. And also the online issuing of this tax identifier needs a legal basis as well that is not currently in the Spanish framework. And we see that European regulation does not provide the legal basis that we need for doing that. Besides, we are working with an electronic identity issue fully online. We are now in place a video issuing procedure. However, this provides only low assurance level identifiers. And we are working on providing high assurance level identifiers using high assurance level EIDAS identifiers in combination with the identity matching service provided by the Spanish tax agency. Again, this is technically easy to do. However, we have all the means to put this working right now, but we need some legal adaptations in our national framework, because again, the European regulation does not provide enough legal basis for doing so. And finally, the evidence for cross-cutting transfer abroad, which is what is claimed by the once only technical system. We already have once only platform in Spain. So in the Spanish law supports this exchange between Spanish public authorities. Now we need to share this data also with public authorities from other member states. So we have a regulation, a European regulation. In this case, is the SDG regulation, and in the next future, the ADAS 2 regulation. But again, this regulation does not provide the whole picture, from the legal point of view. So we need to adapt the Spanish legal framework to make it happen. So legally make it happen. And so that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I already see Michael, so if you want to go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I've got a question to Ana Rosa. You mentioned the use of many building blocks in your country. So I've got two questions. How do you document solution building blocks? Do you have some standardization of their description? And the other thing, how do you provide access to information for all stakeholders supporting the effective reuse of solution building blocks? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. We have a catalog of reusable solutions, what we call the Center of Technology Transfer. That Center of Technology Transfer is an information system. So each solution has a metadata describing the solution. As well, they can be. There are a section where you can attach any document you like for that particular solution. So this CTT, the Center of Technology Transfer, is searchable. The metadata has some different ways to classify the solutions, and with the attached documents, you have whatever you need. You have presentation, you have guides for integrators, you have guides for users, you have legal instruments you need, the contact for the support, the technical support. You have everything, and in this information system, you can find solutions in different provisions. I mean, you can find solutions that are provided as cloud services, as cloud infrastructures, or there are products that are installable products, or you can download the binary and then you can install the on-premise. Or also we have a repository, GitHub repository, where some solutions share the source openly.
Okay, thank you very much for this response.
You're welcome.
And thanks a lot. Any additional questions? If not, maybe given the time constraint, we can move on the panel discussion. It will consist of 3 questions addressed to both our speaker, and maybe in relation to the first one that is about the challenges in defining and putting in place interoperable and cross-border digital public services. I will start with Ana Rosa because you already mentioned the legal part, and in that case, the question is slightly different if you face any additional, let's say, challenges.
Well, the main challenge is the legal part, because from the point of view of technically speaking, even semantically speaking, we can handle it. But the legal interoperability is the one who poses barrier even to semantic solutions, because legal concepts are not the same in every country. As I said, for instance, what means an electronic identifier is quite different from country to country. So what does it mean is defined by the legal framework. We are public administrations. We cannot innovate as freely as we really need to do this. And also we have problems with the language, because we have some regional governments, some regions that they have a second official language, so their information systems are ready to multilingualism. However, even in your own language, it's difficult to explain people, to explain users, and how to proceed with the procedure with a public service. It's difficult in your origin, in your natural language for your nationals, and it's more difficult in English for foreign people. So that is quite difficult for us. That is a real barrier, because that is not a kind of translation you do once in your life and then it's enough. The information on public services are changing all over the time. So you need to update this information, and you need to be as accurate as possible, because this is kind of legal information as well. Is translating the legal basis for the public services, and this is quite expensive, mainly for small public administrations, not only municipalities, that we have many thousands of little municipalities, but also for small regional public administration. So that is, the language is also a handicap for us.
We'll add a bit of information that I noticed maybe is not applicable to Spain, but I think it's quite common in Europe, that the lack of a well-defined legal framework also affects the interoperability governance, or distribution of roles of responsibilities, and also we saw that is the area that is that has the highest or the biggest areas of improvement. So indeed, it's quite a central topic. And I will address the same question to Matthias.
Yes, I agree with what you said, and Ana Rosa also. But in regards of the SDG regulation, there are some challenges, but it was also a driver to overcome those challenges, because the regulation stipulates some data exchange cross-border that wasn't possible to do even nationally. So I would say that that was a driver, for example, for cross-border interoperability, the SDG regulation. So the challenges could be that some national legislation is not in place to achieve cross-border interoperability or cross-border data exchange, for example. But also, as you mentioned, as I understood it, Federico, the legal framework need to be in place. Thank you.
You're muted, Federico.
Thanks a lot. Yes, indeed. Always my. So you might see the pattern, but the next question is related to lesson learned. So we saw the challenges, what we learned from that, and then the next one will be, let's say, how you can further support the member states. So moving on to the second one, Ana Rosa, in your experience, what are the main lessons learned when developing digital public services which are cross-border?
Well, in our case, we are not developing digital public services for cross-border. We are opening our digital public services for cross-border. So in that regard, what we have learned is that our existing governance structures are the key to get that, because Spain is has a federal distribution, is a little European Union, and we have yes, we have a a national legal framework that is more homogeneous than the European legal framework, of course. But there are different ways to do things, and even different regulations, these regional and local regulations. So we through this governance structure, we learn these differences, and then we can learn from each other. One region can learn how other region is dealing with some issue, and we learn, for instance, what is a general claim for everybody. So that it is also a place where we can promote these national building blocks for overcoming some of the cross-border issues. So these governance are they were created for national interoperability many years ago, but they have been the key for opening our digital administration to cross-border.
Thanks a lot. And on the note of that, if understood correctly, one of the main points is also to learn from each other when there are a variety of different situations. So I will share in the chat the link of the EIF toolbox, and more specifically the discussion part, because it's meant explicitly for this reason, to share good practices across member states. So in case any representative wants to share additional stories there, I think it's a great place to start from. And the same question also to you, Matthias. Lesson learned when it comes to digital public services across border.
Yes, as I mentioned, according to the EIDAS regulation, we have 198 municipalities who have integrated the cross-border authentication, but the services that they provide require that the EID assertion contains a Swedish identification number. So we have notified the Swedish the Freya EID Plus to make it available for other member states. But that is a lessons learned, that maybe we have a too high level of we have built it on the Swedish identification number, and that is, we have to think differently. Mainly lessons learned.
Thanks a lot for sharing it. And lastly is, how could the EU further support member states in achieving cross-border interoperability? So Anna Rosa, again, we'll start with you.
Mm-hmm. From a point of view, we have very good experiences from the EU giving support to member states for interoperability in sectoral domains. So we have the SPIRE directive. We brought an interoperability at the European level for all these places. The social security regulation, the public document regulation, even the high value data set implementing regulation, they have provided a splendid framework to work together, but not a legal framework only. These examples, they tackle the 4 layers of interoperability: the legal, the organizational, the semantic, and the technical interoperability. And that is what we need from the European Union, from our point of view, to provide this comprehensive solution for cross-border interoperability. As Matthias said, SDG regulation is even the EIDAS regulation is a drive for member states to cross-border interoperability, but they are not, at least SDG is not tackling the cross-border interoperability from the 4 dimensions. So that's for one side, that I think that the European policies need to cover the 4 dimensions of interoperability. It's not easy, but it's what we need. and also building blocks. We under the Spain experience, building blocks fostered and eases a lot, facilitates a lot the building of digital interoperability, and I think that European building blocks could play the same excellent role.
Thanks a lot. And to conclude, Matthias, again, the same question to you.
I look forward to this legislation, Interoperable Europe Act, where interoperability is stipulated. And even if it's a soft legislation, I think it's necessary to have some mentioning in legal documents. So I look forward to that, and I think that would be a support. You can only reach you cannot reach the full way if you don't have legal support. It's my opinion. So I look forward to it.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. And we have still a couple of more minutes. So if there is any additional question from the participants. Oh, yes, Claudia.
Yes, I have a question for our guest speakers. Very interesting, everything that you said. But because I have another file that is close to this, but not so much, which is the Western Balkans, I would like to know if, because we are always saying that it's important that we have main lessons learned when developing digital public services and how they can help us being cross-border, and also the reducing the burden of having alignment with everything that the Commission proposes. And I would like to know your opinion, actually. It's a bit kind of out of the box from what we are talking, but still it's cross-border interoperability. If you think it would be helpful to have some kind of, instead of success stories, best practices experiences from outside the EU. Or do you think this would be inspirational or helpful somehow to have when developing digital public services?
You mean from other countries outside the EU? Or was it that you meant?
From our experience, when we are talking about just citizen or businesses, of course, they're not the success stories, but their barriers are what they are teaching us how to improve. However, if we are talking not about citizens and businesses, but public administrations, we are talking about how interoperate between governments in different countries, then the legal framework is more difficult, because at the end we have not a perfect European legal framework for all member states, but we have that legal framework. With outside the European Union, each country has its own rules, is working differently. Public administration can run with many different rules. So that legal interoperability, when you need to interact between governments, is quite difficult. It's most a bilateral issue.
Yes, hence my question. Then you said exactly what I was expecting, which was it's the barriers actually that can probably experience, because as you might know, they look at us, we lead by example. So even their national interoperability framework is mainly based on our EIF. So it's always interesting to understand how, if there is any complementarity or if there is any connection. So thank you for your.
You're welcome.
Fantastic. Any additional questions? Otherwise, I will thank again our fantastic speakers for the experience, for the sharing, for their experience, and all the information they kindly share with us today. And we can move on the last part of the morning edition.
Thanks, Federico, and yeah, thanks again to our great speakers for the very interesting presentations and for answering all of our questions. We're reaching the end of this first session, but before we leave you to go have lunch, because I think we're all very hungry, at least I am, we just wanted to take a few minutes, really like 5 minutes, to just go through how the data collection has been, collected, especially this year, because we made some changes compared to last year. And then we have a little Bcast, I think you all know what it is, and where you can just log in. And we just want to hear your feedback on how this year's data collection went for you, and to have, any insights or if you have any ideas on how on improvements or anything that's didn't go well this year and that could be improved. We are always happy to hear. So just very briefly to recap for the time being, you can find information on the EIF and on the results of the monitoring mechanism on the interactive dashboards on JoinUp. The latest, let's say, results of this year will be published shortly, so stay tuned. Also on the State of Play reports, which will also be published soon, and on Chapter 1 of the Digital Public Administration fact sheets, which will also be published soon. So yes, for now, like, you can find information on the EIF in these let's say, reports and dashboards. But if you have suggestions or ideas of if we should present them in any other ways, please feel free to let us know. And then for the data collection, what we do is basically at the beginning of the data collection, we share with you the response sheets of the previous edition. And we also, this year, which was a novelty, we pre-filled the questionnaire with the information that you had provided last year, which we thought would help you, either review your answers and change them if it has changed, or if not, just validate or complement. And we thought that this was a good, a useful thing for you to we know how time-consuming it can be to fill in the surveys. So hopefully this has helped you, but we're happy to hear if it hasn't, or if it's, even if you'd rather go back to as it was before. If you have any other ideas, let us know. We also have what we call the tooltip, which is to help you, go through the online service, to the online survey. We have some tooltips, which are some definitions of some keywords and so on. And of course, we are always, here to support you. We had some bilateral meetings this year to help some countries fill in the survey, or if they had, any specific question on the survey itself. We are always happy to organize bilateral calls. Always feel free to reach out to us at the NIFO monitoring at wavestone.com email address. And now I will just launch the Bcast. You can either scan this QR code here, or go on bcast.live and enter the session code, which is the one that you see here. And let me just take the... Can you see my screen? The Bcast page, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So I will just wait a few seconds for you to connect. And then I will launch the first activity on the first question, basically. Sorry, it's a bit slow. Okay, I will start the first question, so you can feel free to reply. So the first question is, whether if you could rate this year's data collection from a scale from 1 to 5. Also, for those of you who already did the monitoring mechanism for many years, do you think that this year it was better than last year? Do you think it was worse? Hopefully it was better. Yeah, we would be happy to hear from you. You should be able to rate from 1 to 5, 5 being the best and 1 being the worst. I will just leave a few minutes for everyone to reply. Okay, I think I can move on to the next question then. And then the second one is, in your opinion, how could the data collection that we use for the monitoring be simplified or improved or done differently? Here we have a few options, but then in the next question, we also have a board where you can share any ideas that you may have on how to improve or to change the data collection. Again, I will just wait a few minutes. Thank you, Michael. I just saw your message. Thank you for your kind message. Yeah, we are always happy to have bilateral calls. We know that sometimes it can be very time consuming and a lot of questions all over the place, especially if you are also doing the BDM survey. So we're always happy to have meetings. I will just go to the next and final question. I mean, not really question. It's more if you have any. Oh, damn it! Sorry, my computer. This one. Yes, here you can. It should appear on your screen if you want to send any idea on how we could improve the data collection exercise in general. It can be regarding the survey, regarding the coordination calls or whatever, or even how we report on the data and on the results. Feel free to share any idea with us, and we'll of course hopefully try to take them into consideration in the future. I will wait a few minutes, but then of course feel free to also send answers after the webinar, because we only have 1 minute. Then I want Claudia to do the final remarks. So I will leave the VCast open until later today. So feel free to also send ideas later during the day, and we'll make sure to take them into consideration. Yeah, thank you everyone for your time and your ideas. I will leave the floor to Claudia for the closing remarks.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Allegra. Thank you all. Thank you to our guest speakers. It was extremely interesting, and we could see from the discussion that everybody was very interested. So thank you again. And it is really essential for us to have your inputs on the European Interoperability Framework and on the Berlin Declaration monitoring mechanisms and how we can actually improve them. And so really try to, until the end of the day today, participate. And not to forget that as it is, as you can see in the slide here, the main takeaways of today's webinar will be published on JoinUp and also communicated to you. The same goes for the results of the 2022 edition of the EIF monitoring mechanism that will also be available on JoinUp. and we will also inform you once it's published. And as I mentioned before, in the beginning of this webinar, the session on the Berlin Declaration monitoring mechanism will start at 2 sharp. So do not forget to join us to learn more about this year's results of the Berlin Declaration monitoring exercise. It was very interesting, still is, and extremely relevant. And also hear about Greece's and Belgium's insights on the topic of empowerment and digital skills. I'm looking forward to meeting you at 2 and wish you a very nice lunch break. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your participation, and hopefully see you later. Have a good lunch break. And yeah, the same connection details are for later. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Guest speakers, dear audience, dear colleagues, welcome to the second part of our webinar on the EIF and the BDM monitoring mechanisms, results and insights, as we have called it. For those of you who were not here in the first session, my name is Claudia Oliveira. I suppose most of you know me by now. I'm program manager at DigiDigit at the Interoperability Unit, and I'm also the project officer of NIFO. Let me start by welcoming and thanking all of you for your participation and interest. In the morning, just to give a very quick wrap up of what we talked about. The session was dedicated to the EIF. We had 2 great speakers, Ana Rosa Guzman Carbonell from the Spanish Ministry of Economic Affairs and Digital Transformation, and Matthias Ekhem from the Swedish Agency for Digitalization. And the session was focused on the topic of cross-border interoperability, and it was an opportunity for them to share their experiences and some best practices to have been exchanged as well. For the second session, dedicated to the Berlin Declaration, this will run from 2 p.m. to 3:30, and we will focus on the topic of empowerment and digital skills. We are very happy to count on the presence of 2 guest speakers, whom we thank you for the participation and acceptance of the invitation. Maria Deredaki from the Greek Ministry of Digital Governance and Frank Lehman from the Belgian Digital Transformation Office, BOSA. Thank you, both of you, for accepting and for being here. I would also like to highlight the fact that it's essential for us, European Commission, to have your inputs on the European Interoperability Framework and also on the Berlin Declaration. So please follow the QR code or link. Allegra, could you please share it again on the chat or whatever means you find appropriate? And I would ask all of you to participate until end of today. It will be really useful for us. As you can also see on the slide that is here with our beautiful pictures, I'm not alone here. I have my other 4 colleagues, experts on these teams that are ready to answer any questions and doubts you may have. Federico, Allegra, Esther, and Emilia, thank you for being here and for your work so far. And I suppose it is now time to start. So colleagues, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia, and thanks everyone for being here. Welcome back to those of you who were here this morning, and welcome to those that are joining us now. As Claudia was saying, so this session will be a bit structured like the one of this morning. There will be a part more on the monitoring itself. So we will just have a short introduction on the BDM, on the Berlin Declaration, on the monitoring mechanism, and on the report, and some high-level presentation of the results as well, as we had this morning with some identified trends that we had in this year's data collection. And then the second part will be with our 2 guest speakers. They will have, each one will have a short presentation, and then there will be time for Q&A. So everyone, please, as Claudia was saying, feel free to, either raise your hand to ask any questions or to put them in the chat, and we'll make sure to to raise them, and then at the end there will be, as Claudia was also mentioning, a part on where you can share your feedback on how this year's data collection went for you, and if you have any ideas on how we can improve it. So without further ado, I will start with this small introduction, because I know that everyone that is here is probably aware of what we're doing and why we're here. But just very briefly to give an introduction and a bit of context. So we are talking here about the Berlin Declaration monitoring mechanism, which is of course based on the Berlin Declaration itself, which was signed in 2020 by all the EU member states, and it reaffirms European leaders' commitment to fundamental rights and European values. It's based on 7 key principles, which are then declined into different, let's say, what we call policy actions. And basically, the goal is for the member states to implement these, let's say, recommendations by 2024. So this year is the second year that we run the monitoring mechanism, and next year will be the last one because it will end in 2024. And so, yeah, the Berlin Declaration monitoring mechanism was developed to assess the implementation of these 7 principles and to monitor their progress over time. And what are the benefits of doing this? There are plenty of them, but for the member states, so for you, the main ones are, I would say, to highlight the measures that are taken by each one to reach the policy actions. Also to identify good practices and lessons learned, which is also something that we're doing today, to hear from other countries what has been done over the past year and maybe what is going to be done in the future, and also to support decision makers at both national and EU level in setting budgetary priorities and goals based on the level of implementation that you've had this year. But it's also useful for people that work in academia in order so that they can leverage the results of the BDM as open data. They can also understand better the good practices and lessons learned, as I was saying before, and to develop also intelligence on the member states' state of play in digital government. So more concretely, this is the assessment framework that we base on which the BDM, the Berlin Declaration monitoring mechanism, is based. I think it's quite straightforward. As you can see, there are 3 different levels. The level 1 is what I was telling at the beginning, the 7 key principles. We call them the policy areas, but they are fully aligned with the 7 key principles that are mentioned in the declaration. And then these policy areas are declined into 22 policy actions, which are what basically the member states have committed to achieve by 2024. So this is level 2, and these let's say commitments are they lie on different indicators, which is the level 3 that you see below, and these are the KPIs, basically the indicators that we use to assess basically the commitments that the member states are supposed to achieve. They are split, as you know, between primary indicators that we collect through the yearly data collection exercise, and also secondary indicators that we try to reuse as much as possible from, for example, the government benchmark, DESI, the Open Data Portal, and so on. So this is in a nutshell basically the assessment framework that we rely on for the data collection. Basically, once we are done with the data collection, what we do is that we compile the results into a report, which is what we call the BDM report, quite straightforwardly. The second BDM report should be available pretty soon, I hear in the coming weeks. So stay tuned, because it will be a very nice addition. It will be similar to the one of last year, but also with some novelties. We focused on very specific areas this year that were considered, as, let's say, priorities for both the Commission and the member states. But it will, as it was the case last year, it will contain an overview of the results both at EU level and also at country level of the implementation of the 22 policy actions. And we also provided an overview of some good practices that all of you have already shared with us throughout the data collection. So stay tuned, because it will be public pretty soon, and we'll of course inform you as soon as this is done. And I will now leave the floor to Esther, who will guide you through the results for this year's edition of the BDM.
Thank you, Allegra. Hello, everyone. So as just said, here it's an overview of this year results compared to last year. So we see the colored lines, vertical lines, those are this year's results, and we've put a black line to show the difference with the last year results. Of course, compared to last year, some substantial changes were made to some indicators. So for instance, under policy area 3, just to cite one example, we had the change in the KPI from Eurostat, which is not collected anymore. So as often as possible, we try to replace those changed indicator or not collected anymore by proxy indicators when possible. So some of these results, the changes, for instance, some decrease in the results, as we can see in policy area 2 for the policy action 2.1, there is a slight decrease. So this might be, for instance, explained by one of these change in KPI. We also, to improve the data collection, we rephrased some of the questions. So this might have led to different answers provided by the national contact points compared to previous years, because the questions were a bit different. So voilà, you'll see this is clearly detailed in the upcoming report. We have prepared a table that will be annexed to the report, where all the changes brought to the KPIs are explained in detail, so that you can more easily understand all the changes that were made to the framework and KPIs and related survey questions. But here, so what we can see is mainly that all policy areas have increased in terms of score at EU average, except for the policy area 2, where there is a very, very slight decrease of 1%. But most probably, as I just said, explainable by this change in some KPIs or in the way questions were answered. So this is quite positive, because for even some of the policy areas, there are big increases compared to last year. So of course, feel free to ask your questions in the chat if you have any, or to raise your hand. And if we cannot reply now, we will of course be happy to answer your questions on those scores after. And so moving on to the next slide. One of the main trends that we've identified is that we have this increase in most of in all policy areas, but the second one, since there is a slower slight decrease. But on this positive growing trend, what we've seen is that, for instance, the policy areas where member states are scoring best, it's policy areas 1, 3, 5, and 4. But those areas are not necessarily those where they improve the most compared to last year, so where the most progress have been done. But still, it concerns mainly policy area 1, 3, and 6, where we can note the biggest increase and improvements compared to 2021. And those will be also the policy areas that are analyzed more in depth in the upcoming BDM report. So you have more insights given on those, but we can already give you a bit of an overview of this analysis in the next slides. So regarding the first policy area, so which focus on promoting fundamental rights and democratic values in the digital sphere, we've added here a little graph showing the changes at policy actions, so the 3 policy actions that compose policy area 1. But globally for the policy area 1, we see a growing trend since there is a 12 percentage points increase compared to last year. It's the best performing policy area of all, so it's the highest scoring, but also highest increase among all policy areas. And we see also that 24 out of the 27 member states have improved as regard to this policy area. And they have considered the topic of fundamental rights and democratic values as a top priority. This can maybe also be linked to EU initiatives that have taken place this year as well. So that's it for the first policy area 1. The second policy area of focus is the third one, which in focus on fostering digital empowerment and digital literacy. So here again, positive trend with an increase, smaller increase, but still of 5 percentage points. With the policy action 3.3 already reaching 100%. As it's about initiation of workshop and trainings to promote digital skills in the public sector. Here again, we see an influence of EC initiatives that have taken place this year and last year with, for instance, the skills and talent package that has been launched April 2022. And here again, 24 member states improving their scores compared to last year by introducing new strategies and initiatives, including training to increase citizens and business digital skills and competencies. And regarding the third focus policy area, which is the policy area 6, that concerns the creation of value-based, human-centered AI systems for use in the public sector. Again, a very encouraging trend with an increase of 10 percentage points. And we see that there has been quite substantial increases in all policy actions. Here, clearly, again, with the EC initiative, here the Interoperable Europe Act, the proposal that has been adopted, which aim to develop new skills and scale up the interoperability solutions for use. As well as other key initiatives such as the Digital Single Act, the AI Act, AI Watch, which have contributed to this growing implementation of Policy Area 6. So that's it for the presentation of this year's results compared to last year. So I don't know if there are already some questions. If they come a bit later, again, do not hesitate to raise. I see something in the chat. So thank you, Robin, for your questions. So Robin's question is, given policy area action 3.3 has reached 100% for 2 years running, which is true. Do you think it could be measured in a more informative way beyond initiating, or can we close this measure? Very good question. So we will probably keep, we could keep this KPI for next year, although as you mentioned, it won't it won't make sense because it will stay at 100%. There is no reason why it would decrease, but we could indeed add a non-mandatory question to have a bit more of qualitative information about the type of measures that are formally put in place by member states. I don't know if this answers your question or if you want to speak up to explain a bit more. Plus one.
No, thanks, Esther. That's great. Please continue. Okay,
thank you. Yeah, so then we can move on with the second part of today event, and we'll have Frank from Belgium, who will introduce Belgium's initiative around empowerment and digital skills. Thank you again for your time and your willingness to speak today. And I think you'll take over the screen sharing for ease.
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I will try and take over the screen. If you give me a minute, let's see. Okay, normally you should see my screen now. Is that the case?
Yeah, all good.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. In the next, I think I got 10 minutes for my presentation. I'm going to talk about an initiative of our State Secretary, an initiative that is called Connect2. It's in the context of reducing the digital divide in Belgium. And as the word says, we want to connect better to our citizens, and more specifically to those who are the vulnerables who do not use digital services yet. So we want to create a program to help them with that. Now, we all started with looking at the figures in Belgium. And the figures on the digital divide show today the following. We still have about 5.5% of the Belgian households who are still not connected to internet. We have about 7% of the Belgians who don't use internet. We have 39% of the elderly people, the adults, who say that they are very lowly skilled. And we have almost half of the population who say that they rarely or never interact with us in a digital way with government. So that still is an alarm bell for us, or at least an action point to take and to work on. Sorry, at the same time, we noticed that there was quite a boost in the usage of our digital services. For instance, our federal authentication server, which is the tool where we identify citizens online, had an increase ×8 in the last year, probably also due to COVID and the fact that we are more working from home. But now we do over 300 million authentications on a yearly basis, which is quite a lot. The same for our e-box. E-box is actually an online mailbox where you interact between government and the citizen. We have now up to 2.7 million unique users, which is quite a lot. Federal Service Bus, which is actually the backbone of our infrastructure, that reached more than 100 million transactions a month, which is ×4 compared to last year. We think we will end up by the end of this year to 1.5 billion transactions on that back office. So that is being very, very well used. And then the eGov services is a bit what you saw in my first slide, is that 51% of digital users do digital government with us, which is still a raise of a hell of 11%. Compared to last year. So these are all interesting figures, maybe a bit contrasting, but still the challenge is there to close the digital divide. We categorize the digital divide in 3 degrees. First degree is really those who do not have a digital connection, not the digital technology. The second degree is those who have the technology but do not have the skills. And the third level is those who have the technology and the skills but don't use the services. Now, based on that, we have tried to come up with an initiative to, as I said, to close the digital divide. We follow the definition of the European Commission that they defined in 2017, which you see there, which is basically try to get everybody on board and start using without any exclusion the online services. Now, the idea that our State Secretary had was to do something which is a bit like in the old days, you had what they called the public writer, which was probably the most clever guy in the village who was capable of reading and writing and who was assisting the fellow citizens in whatever that needed to be responded to with government. So we took this kind of an analogy and tried to come up with the same kind of service to help our fellow citizens with using digital services. Now, the way we worked is we worked in the form of co-creation. what we did is, of course, we spoke with the citizens themselves. We had quite in-depth discussions with citizens on specifically those vulnerable, on trying to understand why they were not using it, what was their problem, was it technical, was it financial, was it more skills related, these kind of things. We also spoke with the academic sector, with university professors. We had very in-depth discussions with experts in that domain. And we, of course, in co-creation, tried to come up with a number of ideas and solutions to close that gap. We ended up with 27 interesting solutions to try and implement. Now, all that reasoning was also related to the fact that we absolutely wanted to build something that was taking into account what we call inclusive design. Basically, we do this with all the services, online services that we build. We have colleagues in our team that are focusing only on user centricity, on inclusive design. So try to build a website that is at least conform to the basic conditions for inclusive design, and I'm going to show them here now. We follow the 6 basic principles for inclusive design, which is basically try to make the step for that citizen that is reluctant to use online service, to make that step as short as possible. So we facilitate the first steps. We propose different options just to give him a choice of the best and most convenient solution for him or her. We reassure during the procedure. We create coherence between the platforms, which simplify the information level, and we facilitate the navigation. Basically, try to make life as easy as possible and easy to understand, or at least something that is self-explanatory. If you compare an iPhone with a Windows phone, there's a reason why iPhone is so popular. Why there are no user guides anymore, because the thing explains itself just by using it. So what's the result of all this thinking and working? We came up with the following. Connect2 is what? Is an online training course, and it's an online training course targeted to public sector agents. We want to invite our colleagues to follow that course and to pass a certification, meaning you need to do some questionnaires and tests and get certified in the training. And the idea is, once you are trained, that you put yourself available to your fellow citizens, to your neighbors, to your elderly parents, and so on, and you volunteer to assist them in online services from public sector. You can certify to become a supporting person in the back office or in the front office. The options are there. The course is structured in a number of modules, which you see here. There are 6 modules. First of all, we try to explain what it is, digital inclusion, what the challenges are. We try to explain what the issues are that are related to typical digital technologies as such. We explain how an adult learns, which is not the same way that a young person acquires information. We explain what inclusive design means and the service that you build around it. And then we end up by explaining a number of basics on digital support, and we go over the most frequently used online services. We try to guide the students there in how to help somebody to fill in an online tax declaration, to find his e-health record, and these kind of things. So the course is, as I said, is online, so you do that at your own speed. There's of course a lot of information, but information is also combined with little video clips of testimonials. There is some chat rooms in each of the chapters where you can go into discussion with your colleague students and so on. So we try to make it as diverse as possible. The training is actually based in two levels. You have a first basic training, Connect 2, and then there is a next training, an extended training, the Connect 2 Plus. And of course, you need to have the first batch before you can access the second batch. So that's in a nutshell what it is. Let me just finish by showing a few figures as results so far. So we launched that less than a year ago. So for the moment, we are reaching almost 3,000 participants at this stage. And we have close to 400 people who have finished and got certified so far. And I think what is the good news is they represent more than 300 organizations, whether it's at federal, regional, or local level. So we have quite a nice spread in the people who have followed or who are following the courses so far. So, of course, we try to make some nice promotion around that. If you get certified, then we also give you a sticker you can put on your entrance door or on your window, so that anybody can see that behind that window there is somebody who is available to you to assist you with basic online government services. So that's it. I want to finish by saying that we already got a little bit of interesting recognition from the OECD, and we even got the Federal Inclusion Award in Belgium. So we are very proud of that. So that's in a nutshell what Connect 2 is all about. I'm going to give you the screen back.
Thanks for this very insightful presentation. And I open the floor to questions from the participants. Please feel free to write directly in the chat or to speak up. And maybe to start with, I would have actually a question for you, Frank, more on the, on the ground. So you said that we can identify those trained public servants with stickers, for instance, but from the front end point of view, like, are people in need of such guidance directed to those people, or like through a chatbot maybe, or I don't know how it could work? How can they provide their advice actually?
Well, if you target those who are not connected, most of the time they are vulnerable in a certain sense. Either they don't have the skills, they don't have the equipment, or they don't feel competent. So we thought it would be much more useful to have a face-to-face interaction than impose them again something technology like, which is not really as user-friendly. A chatbot is a machine, which is again a barrier for them. So basically, I think most of the people who are certified now are civil servants in the municipalities. Yeah, it's where you have the biggest direct interaction with government and between a government and a citizen. So I see most of the stickers on the windows of town halls, which is actually a logic location to go and interact and ask your question. So these civil servants are available, and I think that's probably the most efficient way. I have gone through the certification process. I have put my sticker on my window in the street where I live. Okay, nobody rang at my door yet, but those friends who know me, they already called me, so they know where to find me. So maybe that's the best way to do.
Yeah, indeed. And I see in the chat that we have a question from Christian asking, how do you deliver the training, if it's online, in person, or hybrid, and if you have experienced any change resistance?
Look, it's again, the course is on a voluntary basis and it's online only. So you just register and you follow the training at your own pace. Yeah. Of course, in the first students that went through the course, they also gave us feedback on things they liked, things they didn't like. We, for instance, had a little bit of trouble with the little video clips that were inserted there. They are quite big, and activating the video clips took quite a lot of time. So that's a technical problem that we solved. So we also learn, and we try to be as agile as possible and fine tune as much as we can. So it's still an online course only.
Mm-hmm. Very clear. Thank you. And I don't know if there are any additional questions from the audience.
Actually, I have one. Sorry. Hi, Frank.
Hi.
Thank you so much for the presentation. So you said that the course is divided in, let's say, in two, let's say, sections, like Connect to 1 and then the plus.
Yeah.
Do you think, like, are you thinking, or do you think there's going to be like a next one as well, like a continuation of the Connect to Plus, or for now that's it?
Yeah, for now that's it. Again, we are just at the beginning of this.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the students went through the basic course.
Mm-hmm.
There's the majority of students yet. So the experience of the Connect 2 Plus is still very, very limited.
Okay.
So let's wait until a few more people went through that course.
Yeah.
We will see how good or how bad it is. For the moment, there is no plan to have a Connect 2 Plus Plus or something like that. We don't know. We will see if there is a need and then see whether we can quickly build maybe a course, or I don't know. We'll see what the problem is and then address it.
Address it. Okay, thanks.
Okay, then I suggest that maybe we move on. If you have a question, we'll still have sometimes for additional questions at a later stage, so do not hesitate. And thanks again, Frank, for the presentation. So now we're gonna have Maria from Greece, who's gonna also share Greece experience on the same topic.
Good afternoon to all from Greece. Do you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll try to share my screen. Yes.
Yeah, all good. We can see your slides. Yeah.
Okay, you see it? I don't see it. I don't know why.
In case we have them ready on our side, if you want us to share them and we move on when you want.
It's okay. Just a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so my name is Maria Deredaki, and I'm working in the Department of Digital Economy, Investments and Digital Skills of Directorate of Digital Strategy, and we'll give you a short presentation today about the good practices in Greece that my colleagues, the head of department, the Director-General, have prepared for you. As already presented, one of the 7 key principles of Berlin Declaration is Policy Area 3 for the empowerment of digital skills. In this context, digital skills are essential of the digital transformation of society and economy. In Greece, according to the DESI report, 52% of people aged from 16 to 74 have at least basic digital skills, which is very close to the EU average, that is 54%. Now I will present you an overview of Greek state strategies and national initiatives regarding Policy Area 3. One of them is the Digital Transformation Bible. The Digital Transformation Bible is the main strategic document which sets priorities for the digital transformation of Greece in period 2020 to 2025. The Greek strategy covers 6 pillars, and one of them is the strategic pillar digital skills. The Digital Transformation Bible foresees 2 major initiatives of the Ministry of Digital Governance to reduce the digital divide. One of that is the National Coalition for Digital Skills and Jobs, and the other is the Digital Skills Academy. As far as concerned, firstly, the Greek National Coalition for Digital Skills and Jobs. This is a collaboration between public and non-public entities that aim to advance digital skills in Greek society. Its central mission is to upgrade digital skills, enhance the employment of the population, and support digital transformation. In this context, National Coalition is a member of the European Coalition for Digital Skills and Jobs. Its national website interoperates with the European Platform for Digital Skills and Jobs, bringing high-quality content on several areas in the digital skills ecosystems for users at national level. Furthermore, the Digital Skills Academy is an initiative of the Ministry of Digital Governance to develop and aggregate educational content at a single entry point, aiming to develop digital skills for all levels of citizens. It offers 323 free lessons on 34 topics and also a digital skills self-assessment tool. One important initiative was the training of civil servants in cloud computing technologies that was launched in Greece in 2021. It was coordinated by the Ministry of Digital Governance in cooperation with the Ministry of the Interior, a public entity, the National Center for Public Administration and Local Government, and Microsoft, in the framework of the National Coalition. This initiative aims to train public civil servants on topics related to cloud technologies and digital literacy. This cooperation was a good practice at the European level and was published on the EU platform for digital skills and jobs. 5,000 public servants have already been trained, of whom 500 have been certified through a very demanding process. The training programs were interactive and practical workshops, online labs were also included. Another initiative is the partnership between Public Employment Service with Amazon Web Services in 2021. It concerned on a new online training program in cloud services. The parties signed a memorandum of understanding for joint actions to effectively address the digital gap in the labor market. It was addressed to unemployed people, and the program aimed at enhancing their digital skills in terms of basic cloud principles. The same year, an online course was launched, Elements of AI, Artificial Intelligence. The online course was developed by the University of Helsinki and the Finnish technology company Reactor. It concerned anyone that was interested in learning and understanding the basics of AI. It was made available to the Greek public by the General Secretariat for Digital Governance and Simplification of Procedures of the Ministry of Digital Governance in the framework of the National Coalition. After the great participation of this online introduction course, the National Coalition made available to the Greek public the second part, free of charge, of the Elements of AI course series entitled Building AI, which interested also some parties. Both courses were available to the National Academy of Digital Skills. Greece takes part also to actions, to EU actions, takes part to the EU Code Week, with the support of the European Commission and the coordination of national ambassadors, EU Code Week ambassadors, with the support of the Ministry of Education and Religious Affairs and the National Coalition for Digital Skills and Jobs. Greece participated also to the EU Code Week Hackathon, an online competition organized in 2021 for the first time, lasting 24 hours and asking students to solve a real-life challenge using their programming knowledge. It took place during the same period in 6 countries, one of them was Greece, and among the 10 most active countries in organizing activities was also Greece with 2,300 activities. This hackathon involved students aged from 15 to 19 years old who had to form teams and use their programming skills to solve a challenge. Partnership between the Public Employment Service and Google was another initiative. The Google's corporate social responsibility program, Grow with Google, aimed to tackle youth unemployment through training and workshops on digital skills and digital marketing. The aim of the program was to train more than 3,000 unemployed young people up to 29 years old in digital marketing and digital and workplace skills. Another program was the training program for the creation of new businesses in the digital age. The aim of the training program was to benefit 4,000 registered unemployed people up to 45 years old. The aim of the training program was to acquire the necessary knowledge and skills to create a business plan for a sustainable startup. Another new generation training is the new generation training and upgrading program for unemployed persons in digital skills. The Greek Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs and the Greek Public Employment are implementing a new generation training and upskilling program to train 40,000 unemployed people over the age of 18 in digital skills. This initiative invests in digital knowledge by training unemployed people in line with the needs of the Greek economy. Furthermore, it aims to update the unemployed person's knowledge and skills in information and communication technologies, ICT technologies, in order to achieve their reintegration into the labor market and enhance their employability. The budget of this initiative is estimated at around 100 million and is financially supported by the National Recovery and Resilience Plans Greece 2.0 funded by Next Generation EU. In progress, we have now the Digital Transformation Program 2021 till 2027 that contributes to the vision for digital Greece, to the promotion of the economic transformation of the country. The actions will be implemented within the framework of the National Coalition for Digital Skills and Deployment. More specifically, in the public sector, the interested parties can submit proposals aimed at strengthening the digital skills of employees in the public sector. And in the private sector, the submission of proposals aimed at strengthening the digital skills of employees in the private sector. It is worth underlining that the action foresees a percentage of 20% for the participation of women, in line with the European Action Plan for Digital Education and the Digital Decade. It is worth noting also that the projects included in both actions of the Digital Transformation Programme concern the entire country and are harmonized with the Digital Transformation Bible. In conclusion, after the user-centricity principles formulated in Tallinn Declaration, the Berlin Declaration takes them with its monitoring mechanism a step further by strengthening the pioneering role of public administrations. In the same context, in EU level was established for the first time a commonly agreed human-centered digital strategy, the Digital Decade Programme of 2030, that is already in force since January 2023. It's a common plan for digital Europe with clearly defined goals for 2030, such as connectivity, skills, and digital public services. The member states and Greece already follow and zoom on the implementation of this program in line with Berlin Declaration. Focus on close cooperation with all parties involved, including European Commission, member states, stakeholders, is a key factor in order to ensure progress towards the digital decade objectives and targets, reaching a high level of digital skills for digital empowerment of citizens and to fulfill the need for ICT specialists for key areas such as cybersecurity and data analysts. That's for me. Thank you for your attention.
Many thanks, Maria. This was again very insightful. And I open the floor for potential questions from our audience. Yeah, on my side, maybe if I may start with a question. I was wondering on the different initiatives that you've presented at national level, if there is any foreseen reports or monitoring where we can find out about the concrete results of those initiatives, so to see the numbers of people who have been trained and like if it has opened any more doors for their future, for instance, in terms of employment or those kind of insights. I don't know if you have any plans to collect this kind of knowledge.
As far as I know, there's no report yet. The Public Employment Service has some of this data and collects this data. And also we are monitoring the digital transformation Bible. And so we will have sometime, I don't know, the Director-General, but perhaps knows better, some report of this. Yes. Mr. Stassis, if you want to say.
Practically, there is no unique report for all activities, but each organization, since they are involved and they are obliged to provide this input to us. And we also try to gather all this information to set up the annual progress in the context of the digital decade. So practically, there is an obligation in every call that funds these activities to provide this input back for the scope of the literature. But currently there is no unified report. There are reports from each project.
Okay, but still, okay.
Thank
you. Very clear.
I also have a question, if I may. I was wondering, maybe you said it, and apologies if you did, but I think that most of the initiatives that you mentioned are more, let's say, at the national level. But do you are there some of these programs that are, I don't know, declined more at the regional or local level, or that also implemented more at the local level, let's say, or it's more at the national level for now, and then all the initiatives that you mentioned?
Okay, most of them are in the national level. The courses through the National Academy are online, so everybody can reach them. As far as local level is concerned, there is a program for the third age that is a pilot program only for people, I think that is now level in some municipalities locally.
Okay, thank you. I see, Antonio, I think you've raised your hand, no? Or
yeah, just to say, practically there is, although there are national calls and every municipality can participate in them, practically there are calls that are addressed especially to municipalities. And so there is an opportunity for municipalities and prefectures to do their own dedicated, let's say, actions to their people at regional level.
Okay, thanks a lot. It was very clear.
Okay, then if there is no more questions for this presentation, thank you, Maria, for the presentation. We can move on to a short panel discussion. I mean, short, we are a bit ahead of time, so please don't be shy if you have a more generic question about empowerment and digital skills to ask to our speakers. So here we have prepared a few questions to ask to both Maria and Frank, depending on whether they have some insights on these. But one of those questions would be the key challenges that your country face in promoting empowerment and digital skills. I don't know, Frank, Maria, if you have a take on this.
Well, maybe I can give it a go. Well, there are typical Belgian challenges, like the fact that we are a federated state and that every little region or community is taking its own initiatives, and sometimes it is an advantage because it can be much more tailored to the local needs, but sometimes it's also a disadvantage because there is no common strategy for the whole country. So, okay, that's a continuous challenge that we have to deal with in Belgium. But okay, let's be optimistic and say that the end result is still positive and not negative. The second challenge is a challenge that we probably all have, which is try to reach those people that are not connected in a non-connected way, probably, yeah, in a way that they feel much more comfortable with than the tools we want to try and sell or promote to them. So sometimes it also is a bit contradictory, but I think that the face-to-face interaction is still the best way to do. Secondly, I think it is much more efficient that the government goes to the citizen and not that we demand that the citizen comes to the government. Yeah, we used to have in the past a bus that we converted in the years where we promoted the EID, for instance, and we went to the markets in the cities and the villages with that bus, which really go to the citizen as close as possible and just talk to them, invite them to the bus to see a few demos. Why not just test and do the first exercise? I remember the first step that we were trying to get and to reach. So it's up to us to take the effort and not up to them. So I think that's one of the lessons that we learned from how to tackle that kind of a challenge.
Okay, thank you. And Maria, I don't know if Greece is encountering very different challenge or if they are similar.
They're similar, I can say, and it is challenging for us that half of the citizen doesn't have even basic skills. That's a challenge on its own. And another challenge is that to persuade employees in the private and the public sector to reskilling, upskilling after 8 hours of work. They're not very willing to do so. So you have to find ways to do that and persuade them that it's something that they will need in the future. It's another challenge that we see. Even if in the public sector, sometimes they can have bonuses, days that they can not be in the office. In the private sector, that's not that not can be done, as you understand.
Thank you. And quite interlinked to this, and I think the initiative that both of you presented in your contribution touched upon this topic, but how do you, in your country, ensure that individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds have access to digital skills training? Or for instance, those people who have maybe less interaction with the administrations and public service, how can you ensure that they have that are informed and have access to such training?
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. Your turn.
Thank you. You're welcome. In Greece, we have offered the free lessons, as already said, from the Digital Skills Academy for citizens and also for advanced skills for professionals. And we have also a self-assessment tool. The local citizen services centers help people also apply and use digital services. So it is also planned to upgrade them by appointing digital support with on-the-hands training. And the third one is, as I just mentioned, a pilot program for the third age through the Digital Skills Academy. And in this direction, launched this initiative also in local level. These three initiatives. So the floor is yours.
Thanks. Okay, on my side, a bit in the same line. We have worked with local NGOs or local voluntary groups who are very close to those who are, well, for instance, in our case, we did quite a lot in Brussels around young people, you know, who hang out in the streets, who don't have a job, try to attract their interest. Most of the time we did that with online gaming, trying to explain them how to make a game, not by making it a real course and pulling them into a classroom, but just by maybe a first challenge, then play around with the technology, and then little by little explain them how to build their own game. And by doing so, they start to learning the skills. We have concentrated all these initiatives in Brussels, in a building on top of Central train station. It's called B Central, and all these little initiatives, they are hosted there. So there's a cluster of initiatives that try to attract young people, take them out of the streets, and learn them some skills, and if possible afterwards push them into the labor market. So that's quite successful in that sense. I also want to take the opportunity maybe to talk about an experience I saw in Denmark. Denmark has focused on these non-connected citizens, tried to analyze and profile them, and for each of the types of people that are not connected, they went outside looking for the NGO or the association that is specialized in that kind of a group. Give you an example, some of them were handicapped people, blind people. So they start talking to the Danish Association of Blind People or something like that. These people were best placed to know what the problems are of that category of citizens, what they need, what they are capable of doing and not doing. And so by way of interacting with that kind of group, they found a way to solve these problems, and by doing so, attract them into the digital world. And so they did that for each segment of these people. Just go and start talking to that organization that is specialized or an expert in that group, and with them together look for a solution. I like very much that idea, and it appeared to be very, very efficient at the end of the day.
Very interesting indeed. It's very good to know. In your opinion, how would you like to see the EU further supporting your countries with regard to this topic of empowerment and digital skills initiatives?
Well, I'm going to start first now. Look, I will answer with EU and at the same time the member states. I saw my Greek colleague also talking about elements of AI, which is something that you got from Finland. Well, we did the same. Finland just put available a tool that they developed. They put it available to other member states. Well, that's the way we should work. For us, it saved us a lot of time. The course is very well made, is very extensive. I honestly, personally, I gave up halfway because it was getting too technical at a certain moment, but it was very interesting. It's all in there. So if we could just continue sharing the initiatives and sharing that amongst the member states, that would be great. And with the link with EU, well, there is a thing called Join Up. We can put all these things available there. So if the European Commission could facilitate still that kind of a thing, that would be great. And then, of course, we are not resistant to some funding from the European Commission to organize some training, of course. Nobody will be against that.
Thank you, Frank, for putting us in the spotlight. Also, thank you for actually mentioning JoinUp, which is a platform that I invite all of you to explore because it's really enriching, full of knowledge. And we also have the Interoperable Europe Academy, where you can have free webinars, and there's a lot of knowledge there. But thank you, Frank, to have our back as usual.
Yeah, and Maria, if you wanna.
Yes, I agree with Frank. I have this. We have the same idea. So to reuse the mocks, and perhaps an idea would be an automatic translation solution that would be being provided from the member states and could facilitate the reuse of mocks. That's a very good idea. Other initiatives that could be done is additional support for professional profiles like AI. That's more than the basics. And perhaps another further support would have in co-funding in actions of national coalitions and the exemption from state aid regulations, because sometimes we take the funding and then the private sector cannot use it for its employees. Thank you.
Thank you. All those suggestions are duly noted. And of course, I mean, on behalf of the NIFO team here, if you have those kind of ideas where, I mean, where we could support, or even if you think we are not the good person to address you, please always feel free to email us such ideas, because we can then redirect you to the persons in charge, or ourselves take upon the idea and act on it. So always feel free to come to us. I mean, we contact you enough so that you can also contact us in the other way. So always feel free to come with your ideas, because we can work together with you on implementing those. And maybe I have one last question, which is a bit more specific towards digital identity, and which relates more to the empowerment of citizens. If you could provide some examples of initiative that helps citizens manage their digital identity and protect their personal data and privacy online. So I think when their data is used, that there is an obligation that the person is informed of this such use. But how do you ensure that people understand those kind of situation and they can give their agreement to have their data shared or online? Maria first this time. I don't know.
Thank you, Frank. So gentlemen. So we try to ensure that through the free lessons from the National Academy, Digital Skills Academy. So there are free lessons for citizens, for online security, personal data protection, and privacy, in special courses for Facebook, proper management of our personal data, responsible and safe use of mobile phones, protection of our mobile and our personal data. So the citizens can find very specific courses for their mobile phone, for Facebook, and for the internet. So this is the way that we can ensure that they will be protected in a way. So also through the applications, the wallet and the EID the use of the wallet, gov.gr wallet, the EU EID, we have all the legal requirements, and we also every time we need the consent of the user. So you should apply consent and go on. And also the user is if he has the application in his mobile phone, then he's allowed to see it or to give it to anyone that he chooses. So it's in his discretion, can I say? It's not obliged to do that about his personal data, to show them. Is it okay?
Well, for us, just the same as what Maria said. We are about in the same situation, and we do the same kind of actions. Your question has two parts. One is how do I promote the use of EID, and then how do I protect the usage of the EID? In Belgium, okay, EID has been there for quite a number of years. It's mandatory. Everybody has it. The usage with the smart card was a bit limited, but with mobile ID, it got a real boost. There are a number of reasons. First, because of necessity of COVID and the fact that you were working from home and so on, but also because of mobile ID was a service that was created by a private company, and that was doing authentication in our name. So it's like a third-party company. The service that they offered was very easy to use, was appealing, was easy to understand, and was the highest level of security. And so it triggers already a number of boxes that is a minimum requirement for a citizen to trust something. Yeah, it's understanding how it works. It is technically not difficult to use. It's relatively easy to install. Okay, there were some difficulties because the liability, of course, is important. But once it's installed, it's very easy to use. It's our role to make it secure. So we have the highest level of security, IDAS level high. So in that sense, we also play our role to protect data and to offer a service that is secure for the one who will use it. For the rest, I think there's a lot of education and communication to be done towards the citizen. And as Maria said, it's still the citizen who decides to whom he gives his data, and he should be aware of the action he or she is doing when doing so. Yeah, that he decides to give his private data to somebody. That's not something you can blame to the public sector. I mean, it's and that consciousness of being aware of, okay, now I'm giving my data, and in return I will probably get a service that I need. That's a decision that the citizen should take in full conscious. And yes, there is still some communication and education to be done. I think it's a never-ending story. It's typically a service that needs, marketing-wise, communication-wise, constant repeating of be aware of and watch out. Don't do it automatically. Think before you do these kind of things. So yeah, that's probably a challenge we will have to deal with in the coming years.
Thank you both for your replies. Again, we have a few more minutes for questions in case there are others, or if other participants want to share their own experience from their countries on those questions, or any other insights on the topic. Please feel free to. Otherwise, again, a big thank you to both our speakers for their presentations and their answers to our many questions. And then I guess we can move on. I don't know.
Esther, there's
Sorry, I didn't see the chat.
There's a question from Robin.
So I'm gonna read it out loud. So do you think there is an adequate supply of digital skill training, or should we see more links made with the EU professional accreditation bodies or academic groups? And also, would it help to have more formalized course frameworks, such as the European computer driving license, but extended to broader digital skills? Very interesting questions.
Well, the question already includes the answer, probably. Yeah, well, I'm a strong believer in communication, education, and dissemination, specifically for technologies like the ones we manage and we put online. It's complex for the average citizen, so the threshold that is there between somebody who is not used to work with digital tools and we who are the professionals, we need on our side to be aware of that difference. We need to simplify, we need to hide the technical complexity of the services that we build, so that at the front side you see something easy to use, appealing, but that in the back office, I think it's a bit the weak spot of public sector. We build services, we put them online, we do a press release, and then we say hooray, and then we go to the next. And we forget to communicate about it sufficiently, to talk the language of the target group you want to reach, to explain how to install it, to explain what it can do for them, and so on, so that they are convinced in their process of being interested and then being convinced to start using it. That is still a job that we sometimes underestimate. And for me, the best result of a good service is measured by the uptake, the number of people who use it. Because if they use it, they trust it. That's for me my best measurement. So yes, and training education is part of that journey. So I'm a strong believer in that.
I fully agree. Without.
Thank you. I hope that this answers your question, Robin. Thanks again for this question. And then I think I'll leave the floor to Allegra for a feedback session, actually.
Yes, thank you, Esther. And thank you, everyone, for your participation, and also to our great speakers for their presentation and for the panel discussion. Everyone, feel free to also, put questions in the chat in case they come up before the end of the session. I'll just move to the almost final part of this session, which is the feedback session. As Esther was just saying, it's very similar. If you were here this morning, it looks very similar to that. This is the main reason for this is because the data collection for the BDM was, let's say, done aligned with one of the EIF in order to not overburden you with surveys, questionnaires for at different periods of the year. So you know basically how the data collection is currently structured for the BDM. As for the EIF, we send you the country response sheets every year before we launch data collections. And a novelty of this year is that we integrated, let's say, the answers in the survey that you provided us last year, in order to help you facilitate the answers in case it's the same one as last year, or if it's just a matter of adapting it. We thought that it was a good solution to help you fill in the questionnaire, which we know can be a bit burdensome sometimes. So yeah, basically this is like the current actions of the data collection. And as Esther was also saying before, we are always here for you to support you in case you have doubts or questions about the survey, about the declaration, or how we conduct the data collection. We organized some bilateral meetings this year with some countries, which I think were really interesting, both for us and for the countries. We learned a lot from them as well. So it's also a learning process for us, and we try to adapt year after year. And so yeah, basically we will just do a small feedback session as we did this morning to gather your insights and your perceptions on how it went this year. Was it better than last year, the data collection? Was it worse? Hopefully not. And how we can improve also for next year, which will be the last edition of the BDM, since it's supposed to, let's say, end in 2024. And yeah, so I will just share with you the little QR code here that you can either scan with the mobile device, or you can, if you're on your computer, you can go on this link here that I can put in the chat as well and then you enter the session codes. and you will see Esther will project the questions. I think there are just 3, so it's quite fast. But we would be really grateful if you could, take just a few minutes to let us know your thoughts on how it went for you, the data collection this year, and if you have any ideas on how we can improve it. We will leave the BCast open as well until the end of the day. So in case you want to go back to it after the session, please feel free to go back to it to add anything else. Esther, I leave you the sharing, and I'll put in the chat the BCast link.
So the first question that you'll get to answer, so it's basically to rate from 1 to 5, 1 being very straightforward and 5 being very complex. Rate the current data collection process based on your experience. So if you think it's easy to understand, or if you're neutral, or if you think it was still very complex this year. And of course, if you know colleagues that couldn't make it today, feel free to send them the link to today's. When we'll share we will share also the key takeaways in a thank you email. So you can also reply to this email with further comments. Always, feel free to come back to us with your inputs. It's a learning process for us as well. And let us know if you encounter any challenge to reply to this BCast.
Okay, the average rating is 4, so it's not bad. It's good. Maybe we can give a few more seconds and then we can move to the next question.
And again, if you prefer to speak up, please feel free to do so. It's a safe space. Okay, then maybe moving on to the next one, which be in the last data collection, so the 2022 BDM data collection, if you could provide some of the challenge that you encountered to see where we can help. So we have already put some categories, one being the internal cooperation to obtain the data. So if one of the challenge that you faced to provide us with the requested data was because you need to discuss with different ministries within your country or different units. Also, if it's challenging in terms of timeline. So if you think that another time of the year would be easier for you. And also in terms of the understanding of the questionnaire. So if there are still many questions that are difficult for you to understand, or if it was clearer. And we've left a fourth category with relate to any other challenge that you could face. Don't be shy. And if you prefer to put them in the chat rather than on BCast, please feel free to do so. then maybe we can move on to the last question. But again, please don't hesitate to come back to this at a later stage. And here it's a question about how we can improve next year data collection. To have a bit of your take on how we could further simplify the data collection by, for instance, continuing to provide you with your answers from last year in a separate PDF document. If you liked that we have pre-filled the online version of the survey with your answers from last year, or if you preferred when it was blank and that you had to fill it in completely. If we can further improve the navigation on the online tool, and if you have any other ideas, also please specify in the chat. Being conscious of the time as well, maybe we can move on to the last part of today's discussion and the conclusion. And feel free to come back to this because later, if you want to give a thought to our questions to improve the data collection and simplify your life. So I think I'll leave the floor to Claudia for the latest.
Yes, thank you, Esther. Yes, I would like to actually really emphasize the fact that it's so important for us to have your feedback. We want to improve, we want to reduce burden for you, we want the exercises to not to be so cumbersome, so it would be really important to have your input. So you still have until, Esther, Allegra, help me here, until end of the day today?
Yes. Yeah,
okay, so until end of the day to send us your remarks, inputs, and so I really appreciate it that this was prepared and organized. So thank you both for this. And so to close, I would like to thank you all for your participation. I think it was, at least in my opinion, two very fruitful sessions. I would like to especially thank our guest speakers for taking the time, both from this morning and this afternoon. Thank you for sharing your experiences and best practices. And now also, as you can see on the slide, all that was discussed today will be shared with you and published on our cherished Join Up. And also regarding the second edition of the Berlin Declaration Monitoring Report, we don't have a date of publication yet, but we can tell you that it will be very, very soon. So in the coming weeks for sure, and before the summer holidays. So you'll have, we wouldn't want you to go on holidays without a good piece of reading, on the beach, hiking, we never know. And now regarding the new monitoring mechanism, so for the 2023 edition of the BDM, you have here, it's an indicative planning, but as you can see, we plan on launching the data collection in October, having it finalized until end of this year, to have the publication of the 2023 results in May of 2024. And we'll come back to you afterwards about what we are going to do next with this document, which is very, very important for us. So thank you all for your participation, and we'll be in touch, I'm sure. Many of us are always in different working groups. So thank you for your collaboration and time. Have a nice afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.